Aaron and I met in our 20s, two ambitious souls trying to carve our paths in the world. He had a subtle allure, a man whose presence demanded attention without a word. His calm, composed demeanor contrasted sharply with my often chaotic energy. And somehow, despite our differences, we complemented each other perfectly, or so it appeared. Our relationship blossomed quickly, like an intense summer storm, passionate, overwhelming, and all-consuming. Aaron was the kind of partner who gave with everything he had. Whether it was slipping a note into my bag, surprising me with coffee on long workdays, or always listening without judgment when I vented, he was there. He was my anchor, the person who seemed to always have the right words when the world felt too heavy. 3 years into our relationship, we got married. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, held in the same church where Aaron's parents had exchanged vows years before. I can still remember walking down the aisle, seeing Aaron's face light up with a smile that felt like it could carry us through anything. In that moment, I was sure of one thing. I believed in forever. The first few years of marriage were a dream. We built a life together. Weekend getaways, lazy Sunday mornings, quiet dinners with music playing softly in the background. Aaron was everything I had hoped for in a partner, loving, supportive, and steady. But life, as it often does, tested us. Over time, small cracks began to form, barely noticeable at first, but gradually widening. We both worked demanding jobs, and the stress of juggling our careers and personal lives began to take its toll. Aaron, in particular, threw himself into his work, often staying late at the office, chasing a promotion he had been pursuing for years. I supported him, of course, but I couldn't ignore the growing distance between us. At the same time, I was struggling in ways I couldn't quite express. My role as a marketing manager at a fast-paced company drained me. Despite my deep love for Aaron, I began to feel invisible. His calm, steady nature made me wonder if he even noticed the emotional chaos I was drowning in. I told myself it was my job to figure out how to feel whole again, but inside, I resented the distance that was growing between us. Then there was Jonathan. He was my boss, confident, charismatic, and someone who naturally commanded attention. He had a way of making everyone feel seen, like their words truly mattered. At first, our interactions were just friendly conversations over coffee or quick chats after meetings, but slowly, those moments began to feel different. His compliments lingered. His attention felt like a lifeline at a time when I was battling my own insecurities. I never intended to betray Aaron. I loved him, or at least I thought I did. But the more time I spent with Jonathan, the more I craved the validation he effortlessly offered. He made me feel special, like someone worth noticing. It was intoxicating. What started as harmless text jokes and encouragement during stressful projects soon escalated into something more. I told myself it was nothing, just innocent interactions, but deep down, I knew I was heading down a dangerous path, one that could tear apart everything Aaron and I had built. The first time Jonathan and I crossed the line was after an office celebration for landing a major client. The team had gone out for drinks, and by the end of the night, it was just the two of us left at the bar. He walked me to my car, his presence both comforting and thrilling. When he leaned in, I didn't pull away. I wish I could say it was a moment of weakness, but part of me wanted to point one moment led to another, and before I knew it, I was living a life divided. By day, I was Aaron's wife, the supportive partner, trying to hold our home together despite the cracks I couldn't ignore. By night, I became someone else, swept away by the thrill of something forbidden with Jonathan. I tried to convince myself it was meaningless, that it didn't matter, but the guilt gnawed at me, creeping into my every thought. Aaron started to notice the changes. He would ask if everything was okay, his concern clear in the way he watched me during our quiet moments at home. I always smiled and reassured him, brushing off his worries. "I'm just tired," I'd say. "Work's been crazy." He believed me, because he wanted to. That was the kind of man he was, trusting, patient, and deeply in love with me. But love can only shield someone for so long. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the strain of my double life became unbearable. Every secret glance exchanged with Jonathan, each hidden message sent, added weight to the burden I carried. I convinced myself I could manage it, that I could keep everything from falling apart. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was walking a tightrope, and it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. Aaron, ever perceptive, began to sense something was wrong. He noticed the distance in my gaze during dinners, the way I flinched when my phone buzzed with a message, the excuses I made to stay late at work. His questions started small, cautious. Is everything okay? Has work been stressful? I reassured him with a forced smile, telling him I was fine, though I could see the doubt beginning to form in his eyes. He didn't press me, not at first. But as time went on and my secrecy became harder to conceal, his patience started to wane. One evening, Aaron came home earlier than expected. I had been texting Jonathan, unaware of the time, when I heard the front door creak open. The sight of Aaron standing in the doorway, takeout bag in hand and briefcase in the other, made my stomach drop. "Hey," he said, his voice steady but tinged with suspicion. "I thought I'd surprise you with your favorite Thai food." My phone slipped from my hand, landing screen up on the couch beside me. For a brief moment, I froze. I had forgotten to lock the screen and the notification banner. Jonathan's name in his last message, "I can't stop thinking about you," was glaringly visible. Aaron's eyes flicked to the phone. He didn't speak immediately, but the look on his face shattered whatever fragile illusion I had been clinging to. The warmth in his gaze vanished in an instant. "Who's Jonathan?" he asked quietly, his calm voice terrifying me more than if he had shouted. I stumbled over my words, desperately trying to come up with any excuse, any way to defuse the situation. But it was too late. He had seen enough. "Clara," he said, setting the takeout bag down on the table with deliberate motion, "I need you to tell me the truth." And so I did. The words came tumbling out, raw and jagged. I confessed everything. The late nights, the messages, the moments I had shared with Jonathan. I told him how I had felt invisible, how I had craved validation in ways I didn't fully understand. I begged for his forgiveness, tears streaming down my face as I clung to his hands, desperately trying to hold on to the man I had betrayed. But Aaron didn't yell. He didn't rage. He just stood there, staring at me with an expression of deep hurt and disbelief. When I reached for him, he pulled away, as though my touch burned him. I don't even know who you are anymore," he said, his voice breaking. The next day, Aaron left. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. Instead, he wrote a note and left it on the kitchen counter, brief and cold. "I need time to think. Please don't contact me." The silence that followed was suffocating. For the first time, I truly felt the weight of my actions. I hadn't just betrayed him. I had shattered the trust we had so carefully built over the years. The weeks that followed blurred into a haze of loneliness. Aaron distanced himself, communicating only through his lawyer. Then, on a dreary Tuesday morning, I received the divorce papers. The sound of rain hitting the window was the only noise I could hear as I stared at the envelope, trying to summon the courage to open it. When I finally did, I found the documents that would dissolve everything we had. There was a short note from Aaron. "I don't want to fight. Just sign the papers. I only want the house and the car." I signed without hesitation, tears blurring the ink as I did. I knew I had no right to contest anything, not after what I had done. Aaron deserved peace, even if it meant my own misery. The last time I saw him was when he came to collect his things. He knocked on the door instead of just entering, and when I opened it, he simply gave me one last glance before walking out of my life, using his key, a small yet piercing detail that stung more deeply than I ever anticipated. I opened the door. He stepped inside without a word, his face expressionless yet distant. I watched him gather his things, his clothes, his books, the photo frames that once hung on the walls, capturing moments of us together. With each item he took, it felt as though a piece of my heart was being torn away. I wanted to beg him to stay, to say anything to stop this, but the words never came. They were lodged in my throat. When he finished, he stood by the door, hand on the handle, as though he might say something, but he didn't. Instead, he simply looked at me, his expression filled with finality. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said quietly, before turning and walking away. The door clicked shut behind him, and that was the end. A month later, the divorce was finalized. We never spoke again. He moved on with his life, leaving behind everything we had built. I heard through mutual friends that he had relocated to a new city, found a new job, and seemed to be thriving. Part of me was relieved that he was happy, but another part, the part that still loved him, ached at the thought of him building a life without me. Therapy became my refuge, a place where I could begin to face the consequences of my actions. It wasn't just the affair I needed to reconcile with, but also the loneliness, the insecurities, and the desperate need for validation that had led me astray. I had destroyed the most meaningful part of my life, and no amount of reflection could undo the damage. The guilt followed me every day, but the true pain came from realizing just how deeply Aaron had loved me, how patient, kind, and supportive he had been. He had been everything I needed, and I betrayed him for fleeting moments of attention that ultimately meant nothing. 5 years later, I received an invitation to a wedding. It was from Emily, one of Aaron's closest friends, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. The wedding was being held at the same church where Aaron and I had once exchanged our vows. For a moment, I considered tearing the invitation up, but something inside me, perhaps the need for closure, compelled me to go. I never gave Aaron the apology he truly deserved. Maybe this was my chance. The church was just as I remembered. The stained glass windows, the soft glow of candles, the lingering scent of roses. Every corner seemed to echo with memories of us. I scanned the crowd, hoping and dreading to see Aaron. And then there he was. He looked even more refined than before, confident in a dark suit, his hair now streaked with gray. He was talking to a woman with bright red hair, her laughter lighting up the room as her hand brushed against his arm. A sharp pang of jealousy twisted in my chest. Was she the one who had replaced me? Did she make him happy in ways I never could? I tried to stay unnoticed, slipping into a pew, but my movement caught his eye. Time seemed to freeze as our gazes met. The woman beside him, graceful and composed, stood in stark contrast to everything I felt in that moment. Aaron's face was unreadable. No anger, no warmth, just quiet recognition. I lowered my head, focusing on the ceremony, trying to keep my emotions in check. When the vows were exchanged and the reception began, I lingered near the exit, debating whether to leave before the emotions became overwhelming. But then I heard it. Clara, his voice, soft but unmistakable, cut through the noise of the room. I turned, and there he was, standing just a few steps away. He looked every bit the man I had once loved, but there was something different about him now. Calm, assured, infinitely more composed than the man I had left behind. "Hi, Aaron," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded slightly, his gaze steady but distant, almost as if we were strangers, rather than two people who had once shared everything. "Are you well?" he asked, his tone measured. "Therapy helps," I replied, swallowing hard. "I'm trying to make sense of everything." He nodded again. "I'm relieved," he said. "That's good." "I'm so sorry," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know how deeply sorry I am for what I did. I ruined the best thing I ever had. I was selfish." Aaron looked at me for a long moment, his face softening just a little. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive you, Clara," he said quietly, his voice firm but calm. "But I've made peace with it. I had to. It took a lot of time. I won't lie and say it didn't hurt like hell, but it's in the past now. I've moved on." His gaze shifted to the woman with red hair, who was now chatting with someone near the dance floor. "I found peace," he added. A surge of jealousy hit me. but I suppressed it. I had no right to feel that way anymore. I never stopped loving you, I whispered, tears falling freely now. But I know I wasn't the person you deserved. Aaron's eyes softened again, just for a moment, but the expression quickly faded, replaced by something colder. I hope you find what you're looking for, Clara, he said, his voice steady. You deserve that. But it won't be with me. I nodded, the tears streaming down my face. I had lost him, and no amount of regret could ever make that right.